Welcome to the Building What Matters podcast. I'm your host, Tobias Neal, and I'm really thankful that you're here. I'm thankful that you picked this episode to listen to. I started this as an opportunity for me to express and explore my leadership style, my experiences, my viewpoints, and see how that resonated with other people. I was hoping just to find my people and that my people would find me. And if you're here, you might be one of those people, and I want to welcome you, and I want to thank you for taking the time to give this a try. Now, you might be here today, and you're interested in organizational health, and you're wrestling with how to make sure that what you say your work culture is matches what you do at work. And I can tell you, I resonate with that so much because as a leader, as a nonprofit executive director, I think that's one of the things that I spend most of my time doing is making sure that we're healthy, making sure what we say matches what we do. I had an opportunity a week or so ago to present at a conference that dealt primarily with self-care for people. And when I saw the agenda for it, and I saw these great speakers talking about self-care and different things that people could do to practice self-care, I realized that the presentation that I had planned, I needed to scrap, and I wanted to switch it up a little bit. And I wanted to talk about what healthy organization owed people that carried the difficult work. Sending your people to a self-care conference is great, but what happens when they return and the workplace itself is the reason why they have to go and practice the self-care. The work that I do in the recovering community and the work that some of you do that listen, that you're in healthcare, and you're in the mental health field and you're counselors or, the various different fields like that, adjacent to that. Those types of fields, we have to carry a lot in those fields. And, whatever the job is, really, work is hard. That's the whole point of the word work. Like it's work, it's hard. The work itself can be hard. And in the work itself, yes, we need to practice self-care. But what is worse is when the workplace is causing us to have to practice self-care. And so I wanted to talk about that at this conference. And it went over really well. And I wanted to share with you, the listeners of the Building What Matters podcast, some of the thoughts and some of the things that I said during that conference. And I broke them down a little bit differently. And I want to share them with you in this episode. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the radical power of holding space and what healthy organizations owe the people carrying the different work. So we talk a lot about self-care. You need to take a break. Make sure that you're using up all your PTO. Set better boundaries, go for a walk, take your phone and turn it off, be intentional, build resilience. You've heard all of these different things, and none of that is wrong. In fact, practicing those things is only going to make you better. But I think we have learned to lean so heavily into individualized self-care that we sometimes avoid a harder organizational question. What kind of systems are we asking that well-rested person to return to? Because a healthier person returning to an unhealthy system will eventually become exhausted again. And that was one of the central ideas behind the presentation that I recently developed on organizational health. And if you're an organization that is interested in having me come and talk to your people and to the leadership there, I would love to have the opportunity to present this there. So keep that in mind as we move forward. The more that I sat with this and thought about it after that conference, the more convinced I have become that this is a conversation far beyond any one profession or any one sector. There are workplaces filled with good people doing important work who are tired in ways that a long weekend will not fix. Sometimes the exhaustion is coming from the work itself. Some work is simply hard. It asks something of us. But sometimes chronic exhaustion is telling us something different. Obviously it can be a result of overload. It can be a result of role ambiguity. So many people are stressed at work because they're confused on the role that they're supposed to play, the lane they're supposed to be in, the responsibilities that they are supposed to carry. There's organizational defensiveness that happens. Leadership gets defensive when you start pointing out things about what's happening at work. And maybe there's also a slow realization that the values hanging on the wall are not the values shaping everyday decisions. That makes exhaustion more than a personal wellness issue. To me, sometimes when the people that we serve and the people that we work with share those inconsistencies, that is organizational information. And healthy organizations are willing to listen to what that information is trying to tell them. We need to stop treating every organizational problem like an individual resilience problem. There's a subtle shift that happens in unhealthy work environments. A person will say, I can't keep up with this workload. And the response comes, how can we help you manage your stress? Someone will say, I don't feel safe raising concerns. Then they're asked, well, have you talked to your supervisor? Of course they haven't. That's the reason they feel unsafe. A leader will consistently overextend a team. And so then what do? We offer them a workshop on boundaries that they can have. Employees become cynical, disengaged, or exhausted. And so we talk about burnout prevention. And again, none of those responses are inherently bad. And burnout prevention and boundary workshops and all of those things are very important. Sometimes we are treating symptoms located in individuals while refusing to examine conditions created by the organization itself. There are problems that breathing exercises cannot solve. There are workloads that can't be made reasonable just through mindfulness practices. There are cultures where better boundaries will simply get someone labeled as not a team player. And there are environments where people are encouraged to speak honestly right up until the truth that they tell makes it inconvenient for the leadership they're telling it to. And at some point, I think leadership has to ask different questions. One of those questions is, what are we creating that our people continually have to recover from? That is where organizational health begins. My leadership framework, and if you've been a listener to this podcast so far, you've picked up on this, or maybe you've seen this in the different writings that I do on Substack and elsewhere. But my leadership framework, when I boil it all down, starts with 3 ideas: lead aligned, live parallel, and build what matters. For me, those are more than just slogans. They are something that I funnel questions through. And when I look at and lay out my leadership ideas there, they produce questions. And the first one might be the most uncomfortable that comes out of this, and that is, are our decisions aligned with the values that we publicly claim? Most organizations have good values written somewhere. Values like integrity, respect, transparency seems to be a big one nowadays, dignity, excellence, collaboration, wellness, accountability, and on and on. And the problem is that values do not become culture because they appear on a website or a strategic plan or an employee badge or somewhere on an office wall or out in the lobby. They become culture through what leaders actually reward, permit, protect, correct, fund, and ignore. An organization can say it values employee wellness while regularly rewarding the person who answers emails at midnight as a good employee. It can say it values transparency while marginalizing someone who raises an uncomfortable concern. It can say it values accountability while consistently locating every failure at the lowest level of the organization. It can say it values collaboration while major decisions are made behind closed doors. It can say people come first while every meaningful operational decision suggests otherwise. So that is why I define alignment this way. Alignment is the distance between what an organization says matters and what its people experience when those values become inconvenient. The word inconvenient carries a lot of weight here. Values are easy when they don't cost us anything. Integrity becomes real when telling the truth threatens our reputation. Accountability becomes real when the problem involves someone we like. Employee wellness becomes real when productivity has to be adjusted. Transparency becomes real when people are asking questions we would rather not answer. Leadership is not tested when our values and our interest points in the same direction. It's tested when they don't. So one of the questions that I keep returning to is this. When our stated values conflict with convenience, with our reputation, with productivity, with power or loyalty in our organizations, what usually wins? And your answer will tell you more about your organizational culture than your mission statement ever will. Because the responses to uncomfortable truth reveals an organization's real values. The second part of my leadership framework is to live parallel. And from that, this question arises in this area. Do the people serving the mission experience the values promised by the mission? This is especially important in organizations built around helping, teaching, healing, serving, developing, or supporting people. Think about the messages many organizations send externally. We tell the people that we serve, right, to speak honestly, to ask for help, to set boundaries. We empower our clients to participate in the decisions that they make, to learn from their mistakes, to advocate for themselves. We show them how to build healthy relationships. We show them ways to seek support before reaching a crisis. All of those things are great advice for our clients, but then I want to turn the mirror around for a second. So what happens when our employees try to do those same things? Then what? Can the people on your team speak honestly inside of your organization? Can they acknowledge uncertainty without being seen as incompetent? How do you handle the words, I don't know, or I'm unsure, I haven't done this before? Can people speak honestly inside of your organization? Can they acknowledge uncertainty? Can they challenge a practice without becoming difficult? Can they set reasonable boundaries without being punished for it? Can they ask for help before reaching their breaking point? Can they disagree with leadership without being treated as disloyal? Those aren't side questions. Those are the questions that reveal our internal culture and to show whether or not it runs parallel to the values we promote externally. Yeah, I believe that organizations lose credibility when those two worlds drift too far apart. We cannot credibly teach people to use their voices while creating workplaces where truth has to be carefully managed. You can't preach healthy boundaries and then celebrate chronic overextension in the workplace. We can't encourage people to ask for help while creating environments where needing help is quietly interpreted as weakness on the job. We can't advocate for dignity in our clients and then use shame as a management strategy with the people on our team. We can't talk about psychological safety with the people we serve while our employees learn that some things are simply safer left unsaid. And this is what living parallel means to me in this arena. The values cannot only flow outward, they have to flow inward too. The people carrying the mission should experience the same version of the dignity, the respect, honesty, advocacy, the accountability, the voice, the humanity promised by the mission. Not because work should always feel comfortable. It shouldn't. It doesn't. But because an organization should not have to contradict its own philosophy in order to function. Then comes this third part, building what matters. This is where leadership moves beyond intention, because good intentions are not the same thing as infrastructure. You can care deeply about people and still build a system that wears them down. This is where I feel a lot of churches and nonprofits and the organizations that are there to do the right things and to do things for people fail so much. Because you can sincerely care, but if you don't build the right systems, it's just going to eventually fail. You can sincerely value transparency and still have no safe way for information to move upward. You can believe in accountability and still create a corrective process centered almost entirely on blame. I have worked in some great places for some great organizations that had amazing missions, but this is where they failed. People who are passionate, people who are energetic, people who have a heart to serve can get ruined if there's not the right systems in place to replicate that passion and heart and service and to do it in a healthy way. So you can talk constantly about wellness and still design workloads that depend on extraordinary effort just to maintain normal operations. Eventually, what matters has to become structural. So the question here then becomes, what have we actually built to protect the things we say we value? It's not enough to create an environment where everybody feels the good things. You have to put systems in place where those feelings are repeated and repeatable all the time. Culture is what the organization has built that repeatedly produces their values internally and externally. If people repeatedly feel afraid to speak, take a look at the system. If everyone feels chronically rushed to get their job done, look at the system. If good employees continually leave exhausted, look at the system. If the same mistakes keep happening after repeated trainings, look at the system. If accountability consistently produces secrecy rather than learning, look at the system. If people only get support because one exceptional supervisor goes above and beyond and gives it to them, look at the system. Because one of the most dangerous organizational habits is depending on these heroic individuals to compensate for structural weaknesses. You see it all the time. Some organizations survive on personality alone, but what happens when you remove that personality? Yeah, we have to build something that's repeatable and replicable, because those things might work for a while until the person that is the hero gets tired, or until they leave, until the next person can't carry what the last one carried. And we look at them and say, how come you can't do what so-and-so did? So-and-so did this, and this, and you can't even do one of those things. And when that person goes, everyone acts surprised that the system stops working. Well, no wonder it stops working. It wasn't a system that was built to last. Anything essential to organizational health should not depend solely upon individual goodwill. Build what matters. Build the system that supports the organizational's health and can replicate that over and over and over again. All right, so the work should not have to become damaging. There's an important distinction here. I'm not arguing that healthy organizations remove every hardship from work. Work, by definition, means that it's going to be a source of stress, a source of energy being expended, that it's going to be hard at times, etc. Leadership is demanding. Healthcare is demanding. Education, human services, public service, nonprofit work, running a business, all of those things are demanding. Work that involves conflict, accountability, grief, trauma, risk, substance use, uncertainty, just work that involves people will sometimes take something out of us. So the goal isn't that we eliminate the difficulty of the work that we're in. The goal is to create organizations where difficult work does not automatically become damaging work. And that requires more than self-care. It requires organizational care. It means leaders pay attention to the weight being carried. It means teams are not left alone with impossible problems. It means people can tell the truth before situations become a crisis. It means mistakes become opportunities to learn rather than invitations to hide. It means accountability and dignity are allowed to coexist. It means we build enough trust that people do not have to choose between honesty and belonging. And it means leadership is willing to examine the possibility that the problem is not always the person struggling inside the system. Sometimes the system needs to change. Now, during the presentation I gave, I offered an organizational health audit, and I'm going to present some of that here to you as listeners of the Building What Matters podcast. So if you lead a team, a department, nonprofit business, public agency, church, healthcare organization, school, whatever it is, I think these 3 questions are worth sitting with and using as an internal organizational health audit. So the first question is, where do our decisions contradict our stated values? The second one is, where do our people experience something internally that contradicts what we promise externally? And the last question is, what important support currently depends upon individual goodwill instead of reliable structure? In the work that I do, all my team members wear multiple hats. I don't like that it's that way, and that can become an unhealthy thing if it isn't managed correctly. So I have to make sure that they're wearing those hats, not just out of goodwill, but because we have systems and structure in place that support that hat wearing. Who is holding the whole thing together because they care enough to go above and beyond? And what happens when that person leaves? If the answers make you nervous, there's probably something worth looking into, and probably some things that are worth building. I don't know how many of my listeners here know who Therapy Jeff is, but I find his videos and his information to be humorous and connective for me in some ways. But one of the videos he just recently shared, he talked about some of these clinical terms, these counseling terms, these therapy terms that are just kind of, they're fading and they're overused and they're no longer relevant. He talked about holding space as one of those, and I disagree. If Therapy Jeff ever happens to listen to this, I humbly disagree, and I would hold space for him and I'd have that conversation. But I think that holding space is an organizational responsibility. I still believe deeply in the idea of holding space. There are moments when another person needs us simply to be present, not fix, not explain, not minimize, not immediately defend. Just stay present long enough to understand what is actually happening. Organizations need to learn that skill too. A healthy organization can hold the discomfort of criticism. It can hold the tension of disagreement. It can hold someone's frustration without labeling that person as the problem. It can acknowledge harm without immediately becoming defensive. It can tolerate uncertainty long enough to learn something. It can make space for hard conversations without allowing those conversations to destroy relationships. And it can hold the people doing difficult work without expecting those people to become bottomless containers that continually just wear hat after hat after hat after hat after hat. This leads me to a statement that I made during that presentation that afterwards somebody in that audience came up to me with tears in their eyes and said, "This was so heavy, meant so much, and was so empowering and helpful." And it was this: healthy systems do not merely ask people to hold space. They build spaces capable of holding people. That is the kind of organization I want to help build. And I want to see you do that as well. And I think if you're listening to this, that is what you want. And if you're working in an organization that isn't that way, you want that organization to become that way. And maybe you could share this with your boss or with the leadership team. And maybe that you would find, maybe they would find this helpful. And if you're listening to this and one of your employees is the person that shared this with you, know that they care about the organization. They care about the work that they do. They want to be in a healthy environment. And them sharing with you these things is them trying to get you to look at it and see that it just needs to be fixed. It just needs to be supported. You just need to build what matters. I want to help you build those kind of organizations. One where our decisions match our mission. One where our internal culture reflects the values we speak about publicly. One where trust and accountability and honesty and dignity and support and repair are built deeply enough into the structure that they do not depend on those unique and heroic individuals to keep them alive. Lead aligned, live parallel, build what matters. Because organizational health is not simply about whether people can survive the work. It's about whether we are building places where people can do meaningful work, tell the truth, remain human, and still have something left of themselves when the workday ends. Now, if you are new to Building What Matters, I want to again thank you for joining me for today's episode. And as I said during the episode, if you find this helpful or you think this would be helpful for somebody that you know, please feel free to share this. You don't have to make any kind of huge social media post or anything. You can just say, hey, I listen to this podcast called Building What Matters. You can find it on any podcatcher of your choice. We're on Apple Podcasts, we're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, we're even on YouTube. So you can listen to episodes there. And there are a few episodes where I'm sharing my face and starting to learn what that looks like on YouTube to have a visual podcast. So I would welcome you to check that out if you want. If you haven't had the opportunity, you could always go check out my website, tobiasneal.me. It's just recently redesigned. And I would love for you to do that. You can contact me through that website. If you scroll down, there's a place where you can contact me. It'll be over email. And I answer all those emails. I'd love to hear from you. And I would also say this, that if you're a new and founding recovery community organization leader, I host a coffee time once or twice a month called the Leadership Cohort. And we meet virtually over coffee, and it's early. It's at like 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we do it over Zoom. So it's virtual coffee. And we just get together and we connect. We share leadership ideas. We share the struggles that we're having. And I try to support them because one of my things that I hold dear is trying to help organizations keep the heart of what they do at the heart of what they do. And this particularly touches my heart because I know how hard it is when you're building those organizations from the things that you're passionate about. And how easily that is to get burnt out in that, especially when it's a work that involves raising funds and starting a nonprofit and all those things. I was a church planter and a pastor in my former life, and that work is akin to that. So I get it, and I know. And I know how much recovery community organizations mean to the recovering community, where I live, particularly here in Northern Michigan, but I'm sure elsewhere. And so I want to do my part as an ally and advocate in the recovering community to help support that. So if you want information about joining us for coffee and connecting with new recovery community leaders in their budding recovery community organization, let me know. Contact me. I'd love to hear from you. My name is Tobias Neal. This is Building What Matters. Thank you for joining me today. Thank you for listening. Stay in the pocket.